It is all over the news and quite unacceptable to say the least that Warwickshire police are said, according to a source, to have urged local officials not to reveal the immigration status of two Afghan asylum seekers who are now charged with the rape and kidnap of a 12-year-old girl in Nuneaton. And of course, I've had lots of emails about it asking me for my point of view. And there are a few interesting points about this, which I'll come back to. That's story one for this video. Story two is that according to leaked emails, or purportedly leaked emails, there may be an alternative explanation into the deaths of the babies that Lucy Letby now is serving whole life terms for. So let's go to the first story. This is GB News, and I can't really believe what I'm seeing here because this is not the sort of information that they get to withhold. But according to a source here, an unnamed source told the Mail that Warwickshire police urged councillors and local officials not to reveal how the pair were asylum seekers over fears of fueling community tensions. Now, obviously, I am against community tensions and the uprising of civil unrest and violent disorder. Nobody should go out and do that for the avoidance of doubt, but it's still not the information that they are entitled to withhold. Now, a police statement, according to this, on Saturday afternoon said the force was still appealing for witnesses to the incident, but did not mention their background. Now, here comes a very important point, a legal point, really. The police have a common law duty and statutory powers with which to investigate crimes, seek evidence, and so on. Now, they are going to be hampered in their progress of doing so if they withhold vital information that may lead to people coming forward, eyewitnesses, further victims, or whatever that may be the case in, generically, you understand, and coming forward with that information to the police to help them investigate this crime. Without which, that makes it very difficult. And without giving such details to the public, such as a case like this, where these two have been charged with the kidnap, strangulation, aiding and abetting of rape of a girl under 13, other people may not come forward. Now, there may be eyewitnesses in cases like this. I'm not saying there is in this case, but there may be other victims to the same offenders who also may not come forward. Now, all of this depends on the transparency with the public about all the details they have, which wouldn't in any way jeopardize any kind of trial, just revealing the background of these men, but also a general principle of transparency with the public. The public are entitled to have full information about these things, and the public in the local area are absolutely entitled to know what is going on in that area. And there is also a general requirement for the police to communicate investigations with the public openly and transparently. This is all to do with the duty to maintain public confidence in the policing. That's where people get the policed by consent from, because they are supposed to have the confidence of the general public. And of course, reporting on those offences and the details, sufficient details so the public are aware, is absolutely critical. Now, there are balancing arguments such as the right to a fair trial, to some extent the right to privacy, but when you're charged with an offence, a lot of that right to privacy disappears unless, of course, it jeopardises the trial and so on. And in the worst possible cases, if details were deliberately covered up, we may even get into the territory of perverting the course of justice, because if someone were to withhold, I'm not saying that has happened in this case, but if information were to have been withheld deliberately to avoid people coming forward, to avoid people supporting this prosecution, if that were the case, we would get into the territory of perverting the course of justice, because withholding that status of these men now charged could theoretically pervert the course of justice if this was done with the intent to mislead the public. Again, I'm not saying that that's happened here, but that is why it is so important to be open and transparent with the public, to maintain public confidence, to avoid people thinking that this has been covered up deliberately. This is a horrendous story that, yes, it may well inflame community tensions, but the public still have a right to know what is going on in their local area. This article goes on to say that the source was quoted, I assume, by the Mail, talking to the Mail, but this is in GB News. They are hushing it up because they don't want an Epping situation on their hands. Now, of course, the Epping unrest, etc., nobody wants that. No one wants violence, certainly not against the police. I've been very vocal in my support for the police in recent videos, and people should support the police. And when they are attacked, and it's confirmed, such as the Amaz case, where he was convicted of assaulting police, we should absolutely support the police, and our ministers have been absolutely silent on it, at least up to the point that I recorded my last video, and I haven't checked since for open transparency, but we should be supporting our police. So there should be no need for violence anywhere. And so hushing people up to maintain some kind of secrecy so that it doesn't stir up people, so that people don't get angry and that there aren't these unrests, that is not the correct way to go about it. Those people that do attack the police do really deserve to be prosecuted for it, because we shouldn't be attacking the police, just to make that absolutely clear here. But keeping quiet about these things is not the way to go about it. So I'll link this article below and you can go and read it. But now another story on Lucy Letby. Now, I've given some views on this before, and to me and a lot of other lawyers, there is a lot to be concerned about with this trial, and a lot of, let's say, skepticism and doubt has crept in with a lot of experts, a lot of doctors, a lot of lawyers across the board. Now, this one really suggests that something has been missed here. And if this is not a reasonable doubt, then I don't know what is. Get a load of this. Now, this is apparently from a leaked email. I'll link the Telegraph article below. You can go and read it, form your own views, etc. But my view on this is that this raises a serious doubt in the safety of those convictions. Listen to this. So, a senior nurse warned of nightmare baby-killing bacteria in Lucy Letby unit. So Miss Powell, pictured here, was the manager of the neonatal unit at the County of Chester Hospital, argued that the department was taking too many risks and compromising patients' safety. This email to senior managers in December 2015, in the middle of the period in which there was a spike of baby deaths at the unit, for which Lucy Letby was convicted of murder, this email raises concerns. This former estates management staff at the hospital told the Telegraph that the nappy pads were placed in the ceiling in the unit to prevent sewage leaking through. Now, the Telegraph had previously reported on a deadly bacteria that had colonized in the taps in the unit, but the extent of this outbreak, it says, has now only come to light through leaked emails. Miss Powell wrote an email after discovering that a second sink in the unit had tested positive. Now, just to be absolutely transparent about this, there was a deadly bacteria on the ward at the time when there was a spiking death of these babies, for which Lucy Letby is now serving whole life terms for, charged and convicted of murder. There was a deadly bacteria in the same place that was said to be able to kill babies. Now, copying in the Trust's chief executive, Tony Chambers, Ms. Powell wrote, "We are currently over capacity and this is my worst nightmare. I feel that we are taking too many risks and compromising patient safety. I want filters put on all taps until we've had the all clear." A risk register seen by the Telegraph shows filters had to be kept on the taps for months, indicating that the hospital struggled to eliminate this bug. The problem was labelled as high risk on the register, which also warned there was a high risk from ongoing doctor shortages on the unit. Records show that the taps in the baby unit fitted with bacterial filters in an attempt to deal with the issue. But a former member of the estate's team told the Telegraph that there were regular call-outs to the unit when the filters became detached from the taps, increasing the risk of infection. He said that he was concerned about the safety of the vulnerable babies in the unit, believing the ward should have been shut down until the bacteria had been eliminated. Speaking anonymously, he said, quote, "I could not understand why the most vulnerable patients in the hospital were being cared for in that unit for which was not fit for purpose. I thought it was dangerous. Everyone in estates did." He also described how there was regular call-outs to deal with the foul water from the pipes which carried waste and sewage from the unit. Where there were blockages, the waste could seep out of the pipes through the ceiling tiles. That's why they were putting nappy pads to stop this coming through the ceiling. And Mark MacDonald, Lucy Letby's new barrister, says, "This is yet another indication as to why this unit was not fit for purpose." He says it has now become clear that there is a strong argument that Lucy was a scapegoat for a dysfunctional, under-resourced, understaffed neonatal department. The jury was never told about the bacteria outbreak or the full extent of the sewage problems on the unit, while the new email and full risk register were never disclosed to Lucy's defence team. At Letby's trial, the prosecution claimed that the testing had been ruled out infections in the babies, but during the thorough inquiry, which is now looking into the killing, how the killing might have stopped, Dr. Susie Holt said it was difficult to eliminate them. So difficult to eliminate those reasons and risks and bacterium that may have killed the children. If it's difficult to rule them out and eliminate them, there is a reasonable doubt. And that is what our criminal justice system turns on. Consultant Dr. Saladi also told the inquiry that before the finger had been pointed at Letby, He was concerned that the baby deaths and collapses were due to an outbreak of the Pseudomonas in the unit, this bacterium. So if that is not a reasonable doubt as to the safety of convictions of somebody, then I don't know what is. And so once again, there's a growing number of expert voices, a growing number of doctors, lawyers, experts across different fields, all have their doubts, and this all has the hallmarks of a case and convictions that were not safe. And again, it comes down to transparency, communication, and so on. But if this leaked email was not available beforehand, one questions why it was not available beforehand and whether anyone had deliberately kept it quiet so as to not jeopardize the trial, in which case that would be as serious as it gets with regard to non-disclosure of evidence and so on. You see, in criminal trials, there is an ongoing duty of disclosure by the prosecution. That is, of course, if they have the information in the first place. And the ongoing duty says that anything that could be reasonably capable of undermining the prosecution case or assisting the defense must be disclosed, and then if that is obviously admissible evidence, it should be shown to the jury, and the jury may rely upon that as a reasonable doubt and may well not have convicted Lucy Letby on any of these things. She's always maintained her innocence, and a growing number of experts seem to suggest that this might have been a miscarriage of justice. Let me know. I'm not saying it is, but let me know what you think in the comments below. And I think this all turns on lack of communication and potentially either not finding the information or at worst withholding the information. I'm not saying that anybody has. This is all speculation because somehow or another, this leaked email now seems to say more than they knew before. Let me know what you think. Please do subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate that. About half of you still don't, but I would appreciate it. So thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.